Greeting YouTube. Not long ago, I was diagnosed with ADHD. I'm 58, and I've had my medication upped to help me deal with it. And believe it or not, it's helped significantly in my ability to think and to make decisions and to see things in a way that I didn't before. But because I'm aware of this in the terms of having a definition, which is very helpful, actually, I have begun to connect with others through social media, mostly Instagram, who also suffer from ADHD and autism, because there's a somewhat of an overlap between those two particular disabilities. Um, I know they're not the same, but there is an overlap with some of the behaviors that people with ADHD and people with autism do possess. Uh, so as I'm reading the content these people have been putting up, and they're for the most part much further down the line than I am. They've been aware of this for a while. They're getting treatment. They're getting help, and they've been getting informed before I have. But I can walk in their footsteps and see what's going on. And as they have revealed to me, it's become more and more clear to me how much of my life makes a hell of a lot more sense now. That both of my mother's parents had it. That she has it. That I have it. And interestingly, my sister doesn't. Nor does my father. So there's some genetics for you. My mother's father was a fidgeter. He was stimming all the goddamn time. Being around George was often great because he was incredibly pleasant. He was funny. He was quick-witted. He was a very talented drummer. Did it professionally for some 55 years. But being around him was like being around a tuning fork that never stopped vibrating. He was always constantly, endlessly in motion. He fidgeted because he was constantly stimming. His wife was a hoarder and lived in a state of absolute and utter chaos. If you look behind me, you'll notice that exists in my house too. It's less than it was, and I'm getting myself into the frame of mind of understanding how much it's holding me back. And I've gotten some organization in my basement that I'm very happy with. I literally designed recently an entire organizational racking system for hanging little plastic bins up so I could organize nuts and bolts and stuff. And when I was finished doing it, and when I got all these bins up on the wall, because I purchased them all from an estate sale, and just thousands of fasteners from this guy's collection. His son sold them to me. And I got them there up on the wall. And I got this boost of serotonin that was just marvelous. Something that would have never happened to me in the past, because I would have never been able to take on that kind of a task. But my mother suffers from it. Where she's currently living, she has these bags of plastic flowers in her basement, like garbage bags for like doing crafting stuff. I've moved those bags of plastic flowers 4 times. Those plastic flowers are probably 30 years old. And they've just been going from place to place to place, never being used. I know that someday when she finally passes, I'm going to have to go and tackle that. And when it comes to her home, I'm going to take out what we want or need. And then I'm going to contact somebody that does estate sales and have them come deal with it. And I personally am going to take those bags of plastic flowers and throw them into a goddamn dumpster, which is where they should have been 30 years ago. But so many of the things I do and so many of the things I experience make more sense to me now that I realize that I am neurodivergent. It's really hard for me to frame it that way, but it's the truth. My brain doesn't function the way a neurotypical brain does. And for a long time, I referred to myself as neurotypical because I hadn't really come to grips with the fact that I'm not. As an example of this, I fidget all the time. And I've got it to a state where it's not really noticeable and it's not distracting to me. It's not taking away from my life experience, but I know I'm still doing it. But it's not obsessive. I've got it. I'm aware of it, and I understand that it has a place in my life, but it isn't my life, if you know what I mean. I wear a ring on both hands. They're both wedding rings when I was fat and when I'm not fat. And even though I am still a fat bastard. But I take them off my fingers on a regular basis to do stuff. But also, I'll take them off and I turn them around and I take it off and I turn it around. And I do that dozens of times a day. And I can't just do one. But on the darker side, I can't stand having wet hands with rings on. I can't have water under my rings. It's a very unpleasant situation for me. For a long time, I couldn't understand why I couldn't tolerate dishes. I can tolerate chaos, much to my regret, now that I realize that I shouldn't. And again, getting to that point has been a major victory for me. But dishes in a sink? There gets over a certain limit, and I can't tell you what the limit is. I just know it when it hits it. And I'm not talking filthy dishes. I'm just talking dishes stacked in a sink. Because I rinse the crap out of everything before I put it in the sink. So they're just dishes stacked in the sink. But if there's something beyond that moving target of a threshold, I got to kill him right then and there. It doesn't matter what I'm doing. I could be in the middle of watching a movie. I could be in the middle of a goddamn meal. Doesn't matter. They got to get done now. And that makes more sense to me now that I know that I'm neurodivergent. How I read things, that I read multiple books at the same time, that I pick things up, put them down, that I have so many interests. I have so many hobbies. It all makes a lot more sense now than it used to. That I have a constant and unending dialogue going on inside my head. It never, ever gets quiet in here. It never gets quiet in here. And some of it's innatity and some of it's planning. I build stuff in my head. Interestingly, now that the serotonin levels are higher, my ability to actually plan things in my head before I get around to making them has significantly improved. So essentially, before I would have an idea, and then when it came to implementing it, I would often encounter problems when I'm doing where the rubber meets the road kind of situation, as opposed to now, I'm actually essentially able to 3D model it in my head. And I'm solving problems virtually that is preventing me from having to deal with those problems in the real world. And I have no way to describe to you how wonderful that is. How much less frustrating it is for me. Because it's a lot easier to solve a problem virtually than to break something or to make something wrong and have to redo it in the real world. Because I can work a design in my head through a dozen different iterations before I realize, hey, I think I've got the best possible design, and I really don't think I can improve it anymore until I see if it works in the real world. And occasionally I still do find conflicts, but they're not overwhelming. They don't shut me down. And I find a workaround. And if I chastise myself, it is much less severe than it used to be. And I'm just getting to the point where I'm understanding, hey, everybody does that. My entire life has been one massive ball of things I thought were just James. No, they're just neurodivergent. And there are patterns to it. And understanding that I'm not alone, understanding other people have experienced it, and listening to how they handle it is helping me. So for all those folks out there in the autistic and the ADHD communities that have, again, further down the road than I am, thank you. You're making this journey a hell of a lot easier. I appreciate it. I still have to do the work. But knowing there's a roadmap, that's a big help. So it's never too late to get diagnosed, whether you're autistic or you're depressed or you have ADHD or you have PTSD, doesn't matter. If you get diagnosed the day before you die, it was worth it. To know you're not alone, to have a better understanding of what goes on inside your head. I cannot tell you how valuable that is, how precious. So talk to your GPs, talk to your therapists. Listen to people who have similar experiences, and maybe you can figure out why you all share those connections. Some of them aren't going to be pretty. Some are going to be absolutely benign. But understanding is the key to eradicating ignorance. And it's especially important when that ignorance is about ourselves.